Throughout the Elbaf Island arc, the truth about what caused King Harald's death 14 years ago has been the main topic of discussion, even with the introduction of 4 new God Knights, one of which we discover is the elder twin brother of our second favorite redhead, their plot to bring the Island of Giants under their heel by kidnapping the kids, and the reveal of a mural that quite literally shows us the history and future of the entire world. Nothing has surpassed that mystery as the main focus for this arc. So much so that with each and every new chapter that comes out, we desperately watch the two sole survivors of that horrific event for even the slightest hints as to what really happened. But it looks like the questions we have are moments away from being answered, as Loki seems ready to finally reveal the truth about that tragic day. I mean, it only took however many chapters because I forgot to look that up beforehand to get here. It's gotta be at least I think 10 at this point, maybe 15. But in just 1 week as of the recording of this video, we'll finally know what happened. Or, at least what Loki says happened. We do have to take whatever he tells us in the next chapter with a grain of salt, because there's no telling if he's being completely honest, and the only person who could even possibly confirm it is not only pissed drunk, but also has a sword shoved in his head, so yeah, his memory's not in the best shape. But I will say, if we end up getting a flashback showing us the real-time event, then I think we can safely assume that what Loki's telling us is true, or at the very least he thinks it is. Whatever the Fallen Prince tells us in the next chapter might end up exonerating him of the crime of killing his dad, but it won't necessarily tell us exactly why King Harald ended up dying. There's still a lot of factors at play here, and there's still too much that we don't know that could have led up to that event. So until we have all the information, we'll not know for sure exactly why he died, but we will know at least who killed him. Or I guess in this case, who didn't kill him. That's the cliffhanger we're left on, so we'll have to wait until hopefully the next chapter to figure out what's true or not. But speaking of waiting, full disclosure, this is actually the second time I recorded this video. The first time was going off the fan translation, but I dragged my feet with the editing, so I didn't manage to get it out before the official chapter dropped. And it's a good thing that I didn't, because the official release changes so much of the context of this chapter, especially when it comes down to characters and their motivation, like it's almost night and day. And now I have that to comment on. Although, even with the added context, there's still not a lot that actually happened this week. This was 100% a setup chapter, just getting the word out to the members of the party, mostly the 4 Straw Hats still there, about what's going on with the kids, letting us get an idea of who's going to be where when things kick off. But we did still get a few big reveals out of it. The first big reveal is that we find out exactly why the injured teacher from the last chapter warned Saul not to touch the kids who were sleepwalking away from the school. Turns out they have these invisible thorns surrounding them that will gravely injure anyone that tries to stop them from following the path Gunko set them on, as we see when Saul tries to pick up one of the kids and ends up falling victim to it. But hey, don't worry, both Chopper and Robin, who were in his beard at the time, seem to be fine, so all's good there. Anyway, these thorns are courtesy of one Saint Somers and his thorn fruit. We actually get a pretty cool shot of him wearing the thorns around his arm later in the chapter. Reminds me a bit of Hermit Purple from JoJo's, which has me really excited to see how he uses this power in his fight later on. I'm just hoping that Oda comes up with something creative for him to do with it, like covering himself in a suit of armor made of thorns, and doesn't just go the easy route of having him use it as a simple whip. We also finally get the name of St. Killencan's fruit. It's the mythical dragon fruit model Kieran, and we get confirmation in this chapter that Killencan is the one dragging the nightmares out of the kids, thanks to a funny scene where we see him pulling gourmet salt for their meal out of Summer's dreams. A meal which, by the way, is also manifested from a dream. It gives you the feeling of being full, like you actually did eat a full meal, but has 0 calories and offers no additional energy for anyone that eats it. Which means, now that we've seen this in action, I am almost certain that we'll get a scene where Luffy tries to eat food manifested from Killencan's power in order to regain his strength, only for it to have 0 effect no matter how much of it he eats. Which may just be how Oda decides to sideline Luffy for this conflict in order to let the others have a chance to shine. But getting back to the nightmares, or sleep tids as we find out they're called in this chapter, we see a few of them just hanging around at the school, not really doing much, just kind of being there, almost like guard dogs. And another shows up later on to swat the Elbaf version of a fire department out of the sky when they're on their way to put out the fire caused by Loki. But now that we've seen this whole thing with the dream food, it does make me wonder how dangerous these nightmares actually are. In my opinion, they're probably a lot more bark than bite, but it does still remain to be seen. I mean, like I said, they did manage to swat those giants out of the sky, so they have to have some strength to them. The question is though, how much, and will it be enough to make them a threat to any of the good guys? Another reveal in this chapter is that we really get to dive into the mentality of these 3 God Knights and how little they care about the lives of anyone on this island, because they very quickly realize that the path Gunko has the kids on is leading them directly towards the fire, and the 3 of them, they could not care less. In fact, they just laugh it off, saying that if Dispatch dies, then they'll just grab the next. It's really weird because the more we see these three, the more I'm actually starting to like them. They're a lot of fun, especially as a team, which is wild and something I never thought I'd say about Celestial Dragon. But then they say things like this and it reminds me just why you can't root for them. Although, if Gunko keeps showing off these surprisingly cute expressions, then I can see a lot of the fandom switching sides and rooting for her going forward. Which is wild because I truly believe that she'll end up being Usopp's opponent for this arc, and by far he is definitely the most hated Straw Hat. So we'll potentially have a scenario where more of the fandom are rooting for the actual villain to win over one of our main cast. Which, I mean, it wouldn't be the first time, because in the last arc, I actively saw people online rooting for Lucci to be Zoro, so the concept of the fandom rooting for the villain over one of our main cast isn't going to be new to this fight. And the fight's going to break out any quicker for these three, because they are extremely bored by how easy this game of theirs has been so far. In fact, finding out about the kids possibly dying in the fire is probably the most excitement they've had since starting this mission. And now that Summers knows that Luffy's somewhere on the island, I have a pretty strong feeling that he might just purposely do something to get the Yonko involved. Which I guess means that they don't have the same restrictions on them as the Marines do about not being able to fight a Yonko without permission. Or, it could just be that Summers simply just doesn't care. In fact, looking at his personality, I can almost guarantee that it's most likely the latter. But hey, good news for them, the fights they've been looking for are just around the corner, because as we check in at the party, all the Giants are way too drunk to understand how serious things are. Brooke is too, leaving only Nami and Jinbei sober enough to really step in to help, and considering she now knows the kids are in trouble, it's almost guaranteed that Nami will want to save them. And actually, now that I think about it, Jinbei and Nami actually make the perfect pair to handle this fire. We'll just have Jinbei take out the nightmare standing in their way, Nami uses Zeus to create a bunch of rain, and then Jinbei controls the rain to douse the fire. Simple enough, and that will position them to be the first two, well, I guess 4 members of the crew to really learn about the God Knights and what they're up to. Because even though he's drunk, I imagine they'll still take Brook along with them as backup, and Usopp, well, I'm not actually really sure what he'll be doing at this point. He's surprisingly absent in this chapter. For a second, I thought he was meant to be the person we see on the roof calling out that the fire has spread to the 8th branch, but after going back to check, I realized it was a completely different design from his. So, as of right now, we have no idea where our drunken sniper has gone, but with the added bravery he's gained from the alcohol, I have zero doubt that he's going to insert himself into conflict once it starts. And we'll likely see a scene wherein he eventually sobers up, realizes that he is completely outclassed in this fight, but has to muster up the courage regardless to save the kids from being kidnapped. Plus, with Robin and Chopper already heading that way, and Frankie likely close by, we'll have most of the crew assembled and ready to take on the real threat. So now we'll just need to find a way to get Luffy, Sanji, and Zoro involved in all this, which may be happening soon now that Loki's basically been dealt with. Yeah, so it turns out his big swing was all for show, guy's been barely standing this whole time, and all it took was one regular Gear 3 punch from Luffy to take him down after his encounter with Cerberus. But I will hand it to him, based on just reputation alone, Loki almost buffed his way to freedom. Had the Straw Hats not picked up on the fact that he was using all his strength just to stand there, Haruden would have let him go. But even though he didn't get the freedom he wanted, he is lucky that Luffy was there, because had he gotten set free, he would have most likely bled to death after running off, and if the Giants had chosen to fight him instead, they likely would have killed him. But thanks to Luffy, he got taken down with the least amount of force needed, and Luffy was able to convince the others to help save him. Though admittedly, Haruden is very conflicted on this, because on the one hand, he wants to honor Luffy's request, but on the other hand, his brother has been tormenting him since the first time they met. As we see in a quick flashback, their entire childhood was just Loki bullying his older brother and insulting his mother for being a foreigner. And then on top of all that, he killed their father just to get his devil fruit. As Haruden stood over him, with his axe ready to get revenge, I could feel the years of built-up rage just dying to be let out, and I couldn't blame him for taking a shot. Whether or not Loki did kill their father, it's really going to come down to how the story is told to us in the next chapter. If we start a flashback, then it's true, he didn't do it. If he just tells us what happened, then things are still a bit up in the air. But regardless, the issues between these two run way too deep to be easily fixed, so even if Loki's found innocent, I'm not sure where they're going to go from here. And the only way I can see them even beginning to mend these wounds is if Loki actively helps them in saving the kids, and then maybe, when all this is said and done, if he's on better terms with the rest of the Giants, openly supporting his brother as the true heir to the throne of Elbaf.